Hello, everybody. Very good afternoon, and welcome to the second edition of the Unlock Growth webinar, a series of informative educational webinars powered by Razorpay, one of India's largest fintech brands. My name is Vedanarayan, and I take care of the SME and the startup business practice here at Razorpay. Very excited to be here. I have with me two very distinguished guests who need no introduction, but I will attempt to make an introduction of sorts for both of them. I have with me Ankur Warikoo. I happen to be a huge fan of him, by the way, personally speaking. He's headed Groupon India before and founder of Nearby. And I don't think he needs any introduction. He's one of India's most influential LinkedIn personalities. Very excited, absolutely stoked to have you here, Ankur. Thank you so much for sparing time.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. I have with me another person who's one of India's most successful digital entrepreneurs, Harshil Mathur, founder and CEO of Razorpay, which has recently entered the Unicorn Club. It's one of 26 companies in India and one of 450 companies globally, part of a very elite list. And possibly, if I may say so, Harshil, the only India-focused B2B brand in that list of 26 unicorns from India. So very glad to have you here, Harshil. Welcome again to the show.
Thanks, Veda. Thanks, Ankur, for joining.
Thank you.
Great. So very excited to have with me. And I must say, I'm feeling a little nervous myself in this August company of both of these guys. Diving right in, Ankur and Harshil, the objective over the next 45 minutes or so is to, and we have a huge attendance of audience. We have a huge attendance of entrepreneurs, product managers, marketers, freelancers who are going to be attending this webinar. And something that they would love to learn is, if you can provide some nuggets of wisdom taken from your own entrepreneurial journey so that they can essentially accelerate their learning curve. Let me start with you, Ankur. If you could just do a quick rewind and a flashback and take us through your entrepreneurial journey itself, some of the high points, some of the low points. What were the things that you did really right? What were the things that you could have done better in hindsight? If you could give us a quick sense of that, a quick lowdown, if you don't mind.
No, sure. I wish it was quick because it took almost 10 years in the doing, and there was just like cluster of mistakes that we went through. But I became an entrepreneur in 2008. So this was before becoming an entrepreneur was cool. Back then, becoming an entrepreneur meant that you didn't get a job out of college, and that's why you started on your own. And I'd been a consultant before that. So my first venture was in media. It was around classifieds. And then in 2011, Groupon happened, as you mentioned. They were putting up flags all across the world. India was one of them. So I got in touch with them. They liked me. I liked them. And the next thing I know, I started the Groupon India business, ran that for 4 years. And in 2015, which I consider as the high point of my entrepreneurial career, we bought the Groupon India business from Groupon. And we said, there is a lot of action that's happening in India, and we want to be in the thick of those things. Groupon was a multinational, and their energies were focused on markets which were bigger for them, US and Europe. And we were just absolutely long on the India story. So we bought the Groupon India business, made that independent, raised money from investors, and that became nearby.com. And did that for 4 years, alongside got invested in Paytm. Did a bunch of mistakes, most of whom have just shaped me as an entrepreneur and as a leader. And of course, a lot of good things happened along the way. I think the biggest fortunate thing, and specific to the context of this conversation as well, Veda, was I got to see the SME industry very up close because that's who we were dealing with at Nearby. Restaurants, spa, salons, mom and pop stores, single owners, proprietorships. And we realized that their problems, what they were going through, were very different from large corporates, chains, and the structure was different. The usage of technology was very different. So it was honestly a great unlearning and learning exercise for me because we came from a background where we just assumed that everyone's technology friendly and everyone's tech enabled, but that's rarely the case. So that made me a lot wiser than who I was when I started up.
Very interesting. I'll come back to you in a minute, Ankur. Harshil, over to you. Your entrepreneurial journey followed a different path than what Ankur mentioned. So you joined and you started Razorpay possibly just almost fresh out of college from IIT Roorkee. So if you could take us through the path that you took.
Yeah, thanks, Veda. I think for me, I think it is fairly less eventful than Ankur's journey. I graduated from college in 2013. Had joined Schlumberger in Middle East to work in oil field industry, and had a lot of free time during our job. So spending those time in building and doing new things And for one of those things, I wanted to accept payments. And when I went through that process, I felt that the payment space in India, especially for startups, was fairly less developed compared to Western world. It was not very well suited for startups. The technical integration was pretty complex. It took a lot of time to accept payments, and the experience was very suboptimal. And that's where the thought came out that maybe there's something interesting here, because payments is a very bottom of the pyramid uh, industry, that as startups flourish, almost everyone needs a payment system. And if the payment system is weak, then it kind of affects the growth of startup industry as a whole. And I felt that like maybe we could do something about it. So spent a lot of time working with Shashank, messaging about it. The only thing about payments is that it's not like an app or a website that I could just build and deploy, right? Like I had to spend a lot of time getting bank partners, approvals, all of those things in place. So even while things and product were ready from our side, it took a lot of time to get through those bank approvals, especially because you are completely from non-financial background. But I think after meeting almost 50 to 100 bankers, we found somebody who approved us, and that's how we went live. So yeah, from there, I think things became a lot more smoother because we got into Y Combinator, which is the world's biggest startup accelerator. And yeah, that changed the story a lot. But yeah, the early days spent a lot of time getting through bank approvals, processes, tedious and painful processes. But yeah, it was all worth it once you got through the door.
Yeah, we'll get to the painful moments in just a few seconds. But before that, I would love to hear from both of you. What were some of those initial aha moments which essentially gave you that confidence that you're on the right track and your entrepreneurial journey is set to go places potentially? Ankur, first up, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I wish there is this aha moment that tells you you're on the right track. It's such an illusion, because I genuinely feel that as an entrepreneur, every day is this combination of good news and bad news. And one thing is giving you a high that you're on the right track, but the other one is just pulling you down and making you just very, very aware of what you're up against. So I would always struggle to find that aha moment which just very clearly clarified कि बॉस सही कर रहे हैं और अब सब कुछ सही होता रहेगा. I wish that was the case. But they were these aha moments around consumers, which just opened up a whole new way of thinking about it. The biggest one was around trust. The fact that India is a trust deficient country. We don't trust people easily. We have been raised by dal mein kuch kala hai as a living principle. So we're always on our guard. And especially when you're working in the deals and discounts platform and trying to work with really good brands, the first question people ask is, kuch to locha hai. And how is it possible that a great brand like this is giving a 40% off? So there has to be a catch, and we will be mistreated. We'll be not dealt with fairly, and so on. So we realized the power of trust in building Indian consumer business. And that just suddenly explained why Tata is Tata and why so many other brands, despite good products, struggle and so on. That I think has been one of the most fascinating learnings, and I continue to be a student of trust. But no aha moment. I wish there was, like, no, an athlete 100-meter jeet gaye, and then you're standing on the podium saying it is, very rarely.
Yeah, Harshil, I'm sure there must have been some forks on the road, some milestones, which at least gave you that aha moment during your journey with Razorpay.
Yeah, I completely agree with Ankur. I think the entrepreneurial startup journey is very humbling, that you get one aha moment, but you get like 100 oh moments all the time. And because you have so many pain points going through the time, it's very hard.
I think we lost Harshil. Froze.
I think we might have lost Harshil, some internet connectivity issues. While we are still on the topic of...
oh, he's back. He's back. I think
yeah. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm saying that there have been a lot of positive moments, but there are always enough pain points going through the time that your mind is always there. But I think one thing that I truly remember is that when we started working on Razorpay, like in 2014, and we went through a lot of painful documentation process with multiple banks to get through the process and get live. It took us almost a year. And I remember March 2015, when we finally, after jumping through all the hoops and everything, we did our first live transition. It was a small merchant, used to sell T-shirts on a website. And we had convinced him that why do you use our payment gateway? This was our first live transition. So when he integrated us, I personally shopped the T-shirt on his website, and it went through Razorpay smoothly, transition successful. I think that was a really aha moment. That first time a successful transaction happened in Razorpay. I still have screenshots of that, and the order got delivered to my home. So I still have that as a remembrance that this was the first live transaction on Razorpay. So that is one moment that I never forget.
That's pretty fantastic. I'm getting some goosebumps as we speak. While we're still on the topic of aha moments, we have a poll question. Would love to hear from the crowd in terms of what were their aha moments in their business ventures. So Shiva and Ramani, whenever you're ready, if you could put up the first poll question, please. What has been the biggest aha moment for your business till date? Was it about making the first hire, getting your first paying customer, making your first rupee in profits or dollar in profits if you're a global company, or any others? If you could quickly mention this, that would be very interesting for us to know. Go ahead, guys, fill in the poll. We have 30 seconds for the poll to finish. Please fill in your responses before then. Why don't we have the results very quickly? Shiva and Ramani, whenever you're ready, if you could put up the results, please. Love to know what the crowd feels. We've heard from Ankur and Harshil. It's about getting that first customer, which is what Harshil was alluding to as well. And Ankur, I'm sure you must have personally gone through a surge. Your endorphins must have spiked when you got your first paying customer, for sure.
Totally.
Yeah. Totally. And both of you, I'm sure, can totally empathize with that. That's awesome. We've spoken a lot about the aha moments. Now, Ankur, let me start with you. What were some of the banana skins, or what were some of the low points during your entrepreneurial journey that you would like to possibly look back on? Not so much because I want you to relive some bad memories, but more because you want to give the entrepreneurs who are attending here today some nuggets of wisdom, possibly things that they can stay away from.
One definitely comes to mind, which has been the toughest moment for me personally as a leader, as an entrepreneur, was strangely enough, right after 9 months of our funding in 2015, we were just facing this massive financial crunch. We had burned through our money. I had made some really terrible choices as a leader, as a CEO, and we were just quickly burning through a lot of cash. And it was also the time when funding was not going so well. This was at the end of 2015, early 2016, when there was a slowdown in funding. So we were generally struggling with making ends meet. And at that point of time, we had to take the really hard call of laying off about 20% of our workforce, which was something that I'd never done, something that I never expected would happen, something that I never believed should happen. And the worst thing was that it was none of their fault. Like it was no one was at fault except me. And that hurt the most, because my fiduciary responsibility lay towards the company and the shareholders. And for that, I had to make a call which clearly didn't go down very well, and understandably so, with a lot of people. And that was a big learning, because while we did all the quote unquote right things, we laid off people, we found them good opportunities elsewhere, we helped them with opportunities, interviews, resume building, gave them a severance package, and so on. And I thought back then that laying off but giving them an opportunity and taking care of them financially is okay. Like that should be okay. But it was right after that I realized that laying off is never about the job. It's about self-respect. And that is something that has been the biggest learning as a leader. It shook me up. It shook the entire company. We came back from it far stronger, but that remains one of the toughest things that I've done in life.
Understood. Thanks for that, Ankur. And Harshil, focusing on the Razorpay journey itself, what were some of the things that kept you up at night during your entrepreneurial stint? And when you actually grew Razorpay, what were the things that you felt you could have done better, things that went bad, that kept you up at night?
A lot of such moments come in the journey. With first one was right before we started. We had the product ready, we had everything ready and we even had customers who were willing to use the payment platform. But the banks hadn't given us the final approval, and I was spending almost every day going and convincing the banks, and there were some requirements or the other that we had to fulfill. And it took a lot of time. And in those times, me and Shank, my co-founder, we used to spend a lot of time thinking, hey, we could have built something in a space where we control the destiny. Maybe we could have built something in e-commerce, something in food delivery, something where we could build ourselves and launch it out and not depend on a banker to approve us. But I think that is one of the toughest times because you're sitting with everything right in your platter, but you can't go live, you can't keep the business moving, there are no metrics, and that is definitely demotivating. Finally, we got through that, and that was a moment I was sitting, and that's why that moment was very important. And it took us almost a year and a half to get to that point where the first live transition could happen. Following that, I think there have been ups and downs, but I think that is the biggest moment that I remember.
Understood. While we are still on the topic of staying up at night, love to hear from the audience here in terms of what are the things about their business that worries them, that keeps them up at night. Ramani and Shiva, whenever you're ready, if you could put up the second poll question, please. I would love to hear from the audience. Is it about not being able to get customers? Is it about losing customers, the leaky bucket syndrome, so to speak? So do you lose customers, the prospect of losing customers after the first transaction? Running out of cash, something that Ankur spoke about. Government regulations and taxes, something about the ecosystem in general, which is what Harshil was alluding to. What is it about your business that keeps you up at night? I would love to hear your opinions. Love to hear from the Janta who've joined here today. Ramani, Shiva, if the results are ready, whenever you're ready, if you could put up the results, please. Love to hear what the audience thinks. Very interesting. Again, not being able to acquire customers, which is the number one. Government regulations and taxes and the ecosystem itself is at the bottom, and which is a testament to how entrepreneur friendly the country has become in the last 5-6 years, if I may say so. So, which is why the entrepreneurs of today don't seem to, at least the government and regulations and the ecosystem doesn't keep them up at night as much as being able to acquire new customers, which is a good headache to have, which is the kind of headaches that you want to have as an entrepreneur, I would imagine. Now, I think we've done a lot of rewind and flashback, Ankur and Harshil. Now, looking at the current times that we live in, right? And we've got to talk about the T-Rex in the room, which is the pandemic itself and COVID, which has fundamentally altered the business landscape itself. So, Ankur, if you were an entrepreneur starting out today, in the new world order, so to speak, or if you are giving advice to entrepreneurs who are running businesses in the new world order, so to speak, what kind of nuggets of wisdom would you give them?
There are essentially mental models that I use, Veda, for answering this question, and one of my favorite ones that I have time and again used at Nearby, and now I use for evaluating any new idea, is what I call the TMT model. It's the time, money, trust model. Essentially, what it says is very simply, and nothing rocket science, every consumer's financial interaction is a combination of their understanding of their own time, their own money, and how they deal with trust. And when you start thinking of businesses, and especially the environment that we are in, it suddenly becomes a lot clearer of what would flourish and what would not. For instance, during the lockdown, the last 6 months, what kind of businesses flourished? The ones that rode on the fact that people had a lot more time than they used to have in the past, because suddenly they were home, they were working from home, and even if there was work, there was still a lot more time. They weren't getting as much money, or at least weren't making as much money. A lot of people lost their jobs. Some had to go through pay cuts. It was not predictable income, so on. And trust in general took a beating because people were like, oh, I'm not stepping out, and it could be this, it could be that, and so on. So essentially, any business that rode on the fact that I am tapping into a time-rich, money-poor, trust-poor consumer flourished. And that's when you see content flourishing, because content is bang in the center of time, richness, money, poorness, and trust poorness. When you think of EdTech, it rode on the fact that there is a lot more time that parents have to evaluate what their kids should go through. Kids have to evaluate what they could go through. It has to come at a point where it is subscription-based and not per course. And that's why subscription EdTech took off. And it rides on trust. So there were a lot of trust investments that were made. And you see all campaigns also establishing trust, where they're showing celebrities and people who've done really well in life and how they can be there, so on and so forth. So I think it's very important as an entrepreneur to always question what market you're getting into and map onto what is the reality of the world right now. And the reality of the world is it has fundamentally altered. It has. Trust is going to be a big component of the world going forward. I definitely think so. I feel small businesses and individual creators will see an uprising in a way that the world never has. My prediction is that the next decade will show the world its first solo employee unicorn. A company that is not a company, but just one individual. It could be Joe Rogan. It could be someone equivalent, but essentially will be one person who will create such fantastic either content or will be such a fantastic influencer, maybe a gamer, maybe an instructor or a teacher or a guide, that they will create so-called a corporation driven by just their own personal brand. And if that's the case, then it is inevitable there will be millions of small businesses that will come in riding that long tail of the industry. So it is a very exciting space to be, because now, perhaps for the first time ever in the world, corporations are not any stronger than individuals. And if you are a small business, if you're an individual creator, if you're someone who wants to not fall for the trap, and I don't mean any offense anyone in the room, fall for the trap of mega funding and going all go home or go big and something like that, but is very, very clinically focused on building a great business, making it profitable, not caring about super fast growth, but doing it the right way and doing it the best way. I think that the next decade could be a brilliant, brilliant time to build businesses like these.
You're saying the system was a lot more democratized now, and David, in fact, has a chance against Goliath, if I may.
Absolutely.
If I could paraphrase what you just said.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary.
Yep. And I love that TMT acronym, and I'm having a lot of fun in this webinar. And to the 400 plus people in the audience which has turned up, if you are having fun as well, please take screenshots from the webinar, show us your love on Twitter, while the team has been reminding on the chat window, you stand a chance to win some fantastic goodies, some Amazon vouchers and more. So please show us your love on Twitter, use the hashtag unlock growth, and talk about some quotable quotes, tweetable tweets that you've heard so far in the webinar. Warikoo just spoke about the TMT acronym, which I thought was very interesting. And David does indeed have a chance against Goliath in the new world order, which I think is very interesting. Harshil, over to you, boss. Why don't you tell us what nuggets of wisdom, mantras would you suggest for entrepreneurs in the new world order?
Yeah, I think COVID has been a significantly changing time for the entire world, and we ourselves had to reinvent our business a lot when COVID hit in March, April this year. And travel used to be a significant portion of our business because a good portion of online payments come through travel. And suddenly 30%, 40% of the business vanished. So we had to refocus our energy, find opportunities for growth. I think that's where the wisdom comes out, right? Every incident, you could take it as a loss or you could take it as an opportunity. And COVID has become an opportunity as much as it's a loss for most businesses. So if you find the right places where you see opportunity, right places where you see growth happening, for example, COVID has been a positive turning time for a lot of ed tech companies, a lot of gaming companies, a lot of online only businesses, e-commerce businesses, grocery businesses, and so on and so forth. So, and I think that's what entrepreneurship is it's being smart, it's being scrappy, it's always finding the right opportunity for growth, irrespective of what the world throws at you. And I think, and as long as you can find that right opportunity of growth, there's no end to the amount of growth you can have, even in toughest of times. So I think the most important quality of any entrepreneur that is tested in these times is perseverance. How long can you continue and try to find ways to grow, irrespective of what the world is throwing at you? And I think back at my startup story, the only thing that has stood out and the only reason we have been where we are is because of perseverance.
That's fantastic. Perseverance, resilience, again, some nuggets of wisdom for entrepreneurs starting up with the new world order. Do shows your love on Twitter. Put out some of these tweets, some of the learnings that you have taken away from the webinar so far, from what both of these highly successful entrepreneurs, have been, actually talking about. So, Ankur, you spoke about entrepreneurship no longer being elitist. It's now a lot more egalitarian, about how David now has a chance against Goliath. And you actually run your own business, which talks about how people can actually monetize their own passions and who can actually do better in their own entrepreneurial journey. Do you want to take a moment and give the audience here a sense of what you do and how you help entrepreneurs in their own journeys?
Sure. It's been a fascinating journey here. I have been creating content for the last 4 years. It started with a very different objective to create Nearby as an employer brand, but very quickly took a much larger shape than anyone imagined. So when I stepped down as the CEO of my startup last year, I decided to go into it deeper and to see where it takes me. And when COVID struck, that was a time when, just as Harshil, I also thought I should reimagine myself, and everything that I was doing until then, which was a lot more about corporate talks and mentoring and coaching, came to a standstill. So I had to figure out what else could I do with my time and my experience? And that's when I began to explore live webinars. And the idea was, can I share whatever is it that I know as an entrepreneur, as an individual, as a content creator with the world, and do it in a fashion that is maybe just as similar as it would have been if I was standing in front of them as an audience? And I did that for about 3 months. In a duration of 3 months, I hosted about 18 webinars. And it was fascinating. Every single time, hundreds of people coming in, the energy in the room, the questions that they asked, the topics and the community that we were able to build. It was just fascinating, very humbling. All of which, by the way, and this is not an insertion because this is a Razorpay conversation. I speak about it actively. I think a large part of the credit for how I was able to very seamlessly navigate this journey is because of Razorpay, and specifically the payment pages product. Because I am not a coder. I do have a community of coder, but the last thing I want to do is boss ek page bana de payment lene ke liye. Like, that's like the worst use of any engineer's time. So, and it's a great story that I do want to share. My wife is an organic farmer, and she has been part of a startup for the last 2 years in Delhi NCR. And what they do is conduct workshops on organic farming and also help people set up kitchen gardens. For the last 2 years, they have been accepting payments on Razorpay, which is when I got to know of Razorpay. It was through my wife. And I knew of Razorpay, but I didn't know of it as a payment product as such. I knew of it as a startup. So when I had to evaluate what I use, of course, I had a bunch of options, and I asked everyone around, and unanimously, everyone was like, Razorpay. Boss, if you don't know how to code and you want to depend on a reliable product, just go with RP. And that's what I did. And it's been fascinating. Till date, all my courses, my webinars are sold on Razorpay. It still continues to be there on my page. And what I've done now is I run formal courses. Literally, there are 10,000 people that have gone through these courses in the last 6 months. And there are courses around startups, courses around how to manage your career, how to become a public speaker, everything that I possibly know and can share. And it's been a very, very humbling journey, Veda. So I'm looking forward to this new stint.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ankur. And internally at Razorpay, we have this entire terminology of hashtag no-code products. Which essentially democratizes access to payments products for entrepreneurs, because one of the increasing trends that we've observed is that a lot of entrepreneurs today want to embrace digital payments, but they know nothing about technology, or nothing about coding, like yourself. But they still want to start using digital payments. So this essentially removes all inertia barriers and enables a lot of these SMEs and startup founders to embrace digital payments and jump onto the digital bandwagon, so to speak. That's a great segue since we're talking about payments. So let me come to you, Harshil, really quickly. So what kind of changes have you observed, what kind of winds of change have kind of, swept across the payments landscape in India, which have been accelerated because of the pandemic? If you could give us a quick lowdown.
Yeah, no, thanks, Veda. That's a very nice question. Pandemic has definitely changed the entire world order, and every industry is getting revamped because of it. Payments is no different. And most of these trends were happening, but would have taken like 2 to 5 years to happen. But pandemic has accelerated these trends. So one of the examples I would give is, like, for example, we had been pushing people to accept digital payments for a while now. It is always a push-based approach where you have to go out, tell, especially a lot of traditional industries, right? So you go to a school and say, hey, why don't you accept online payments? The response is, people come to us and pay cash. Why do we need online payments? Right? You go to a typical, like, we work with a lot of FMCG brands and say, why don't you accept your retailer, distributor payments through online payments? It works on cash, it works on check. Why do we need to touch it? I think the pandemic has changed that worldview significantly. And these changes would have happened, and it has happened in West in last 10 years. These would have happened in India as well in next 5 years. But it would have taken 5 years for it to happen slowly, steadily with that time. Because of the pandemic, a lot of these changes are happening immediately. Like, people are suddenly realizing that, hey, now education is happening online. People are studying things online. They are not going to come to school just to pay the fees, right? So they have to accept online payments. FMCG, now cash is considered a source of transmission. People are worried about touching cash or check or those kind of payments. So they all want to distance themselves. But one of the most interesting trends that we're seeing, in what Ankur also talked about earlier, the concept of individual entrepreneurship has scaled up a lot because of pandemic. People are staying at home, figuring out what they are good at, and selling those things on Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook. You have the channels available to market yourself, and digital payments is a way that you monetize yourself, and they are utilizing that. We have people selling cupcakes on Instagram, books. They're doing paintings and selling it on Instagram. There are people selling things on their WhatsApp groups, on their Facebook groups, and just using our payment links to send across and accept payments. And I think that trend is really important, because online payments or online commerce is not just for the techies of the world. It's not just that, okay, if you know programming, you can build and launch it out and earn money. It is the new way of doing commerce for everyone. Like anyone could open a shop. And in fact, opening a shop is much more harder these days than it is to open an online shop. Anyone, if you have a talent, if you have something that people would want to buy, you can just put up a link on WhatsApp, on Instagram, on Facebook, put up a payment link from Razorpay and accept payments. Right? It's as simple as that. I think that's the true democratization that we're seeing in the last couple of months. I think that's happening primarily because most commerce is happening online. People are staying at home, media, discovering things over WhatsApp. And I think that kind of change is the most exciting trend. And I think I completely agree with Ankur that the way this change is happening, there's actually a strong possibility that a single person company could probably become $1 billion company in itself, because of the kind of commerce that individual brands are able to do. And we're seeing a lot of D2C brands come up in the last couple of months, which are just somebody selling socks online, somebody selling t-shirts online, somebody just selling razors online, and anything and everything you can sell just sitting in your bedroom. You don't have to step out. You don't have to buy an expensive space inside a mall to make that happen. And I think that is the most exciting trend.
It's pretty cool, Harshil. And if I were to paraphrase what you just said, it's almost like the pandemic is a time warp or a time bubble of sorts. And it is essentially accelerated. It's like you've entered the pandemic and you've exited at a point which is 5 years, much further along, down the line, which again is very, very interesting. And the pandemic has accelerated the change that was happening organically, so to speak. Again, a quick call out to all of the audiences, 450 plus people. Show us your love on Twitter. And we're also having an AMA and Ask Me Anything session where we'll have a bunch of quick fire questions thrown at both Ankur and Harshil. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask to both Ankur and Harshil, please put it out on Twitter. Use the hashtag #UnlockGrowth, and we'd be happy to raise it to both of these experts. And of course, show us your love. Use the hashtag #UnlockGrowth, and you stand a chance to win Amazon vouchers and a lot of other goodies as well. Towards the end of the webinar, we also give all of the attendees an opportunity to win 50,000 free credits on the Razorpay platform, which will allow you to essentially receive 50,000 rupees worth of payments from your customers at zero commission. So do stay on till the end of the webinar. Stay tuned. Shifting track slightly, Ankur and Harshil, before we dive into the audience Q&A section, both of you are possibly role models and mentors for a lot of entrepreneurs today. When you were starting off, who were your role models? Who were your mentors? Who were the people that you looked up to? Ankur, if you could go first.
I, for the longest time, have had the highest level of respect for Deep Kalra, who is the founder and until recently was the CEO of Make My Trip. I love the fact because one, he's not a techie and he's built such a wonderful product. Two, persistence and perseverance, just as Harshil. So like whenever I meet him, I was like, boss, 20 saal ho gaye aapko, and you've been just at the travel industry like nobody's business. And it's just so inspiring, because even when you look at a Naukri.com, they've ventured into other areas, but like Make My Trip is this hawk-eyed. Wo Arjun ki tir kaman, wo aankh jaisa, just focus on this one thing, and always very inspiring, very humble. I love the culture that they've built. So for the longest time, he was the one that I wanted to emulate.
It's pretty cool. And I was part of an online travel startup a while back, which shut down pretty unceremoniously. So I know for a fact how competitive and ultra competitive the online travel world is. And for them to have built the kind of brand and build the kind of equity in such a hyper competitive space is extremely commendable. Harshil, over to you. Who are the people that you looked up to and you still do?
There are a lot of people, and I think there are a lot of great people who have built a lot of things. I think closer to home in India, the one person I've interacted with and keep seeking advice, Bhavish Agarwal from Ola. I remember, I mean, his ambition is really strong. And I remember I had a meeting with him about less than a year back in his office on a Saturday. And I met him and I asked him, hey, you are a multi-billion-dollar company. Why do you still work on Saturdays? And his response to that was, ambition never dies. Because and no matter whether it's a multi-billion-dollar company, he still has a lot of ambition, wants to make Ola a global brand, and the kind of ambition that he still carries to the point that he's still working on weekends, on weekdays, on weeknights, just to build this large multinational global brand in form of Ola. The second founder that I read about, of course, but haven't ever met, is Elon Musk. I think the reason people look up to Elon Musk is he's really a guy who's given all of it up to, and he's single-handedly driving like 3 major changes and for the world. And it's not just about making money. He has made enough money with PayPal, but he's building solar panels, he's building electric cars, he's building spaceships, and I mean, running one startup in itself is extremely hard. And you can ask me and Ankur both about that. But to run 3 world-changing companies at a time seems like an impossible feat. I don't know how he does it, but it's definitely inspiring.
Yeah, absolute. So I mean, big fan of Elon Musk and an absolute freak as well. I read somewhere that he learned rocket science by himself. He self-taught himself rocket science in 6 months. He read it from a book and by talking to people, which is like unbelievable. Just blew me away when I read that. And I said that would be the last question, but I would love to ask one more question to both of you, Ankur and Harshil. And you hear this cliche term often about moats, about secret sauce, right? What is you need to have a secret sauce as a business. You need to build moats as a business. If I were to possibly, Atmanirbharize that term, secret sauce, and say, what could be the secret tadka that businesses in this day and age, in the Indian context, need to focus on? What would be, again, some, dollops of advice that you would give?
Harshil, why don't you go?
I think Ankur,
I think there's a very simple advice, and we learned it. I learned it from YC, and I think it's the simplest mantra that helps you be successful. It's called make something people want. As long as you're building something that people need, you'll always find it. It doesn't need to be big. It doesn't need to be something and it's very simple. You don't need to make something that a lot of people kind of want. You want to make something that even if a few people really, really want, right? And that is enough to make a business, to make a startup, to make a company out of it. So you have to find your niche. You want to find a set of people, a set of companies, a set of businesses, whatever it may be, that really needs something to be solved. And as long as you'll be able to make money, you'll be able to make a business out of it, you'll be able to scale the business over time. All of those answers will get solved as long as you're solving a problem. And that's where we started. We didn't start Razorpay by thinking, hey, I want to do a startup. Let's see what we can build. We were working on our jobs. We found a problem that we felt a large number of people in the country face and are going to face in the next couple of years. And we said that, hey, if we solve this well, these people will come to us and we can build a business out of it. So yeah, make something people want would be my mantra.
Very interesting. If I were to paraphrase what you just said, again, you're saying don't make something that everybody wants, but make everything that somebody might actually want, a small segment might actually want, if I may say so.
Make something that even if a small number of people really, really want. And as long as you do that will build a business around it.
Mean everything for a few people instead of trying to mean something for a lot of people, if I may say so. Thank you for that, Harshil. And once again, a quick call out to all of the people, all of the audiences. Do tweet out your questions using the hashtag #UnlockGrowth. And we'd love to, we have around 20 minutes left in the webinar. We will get both of the experts here to answer all of the questions that you have. And if you have any feedback, and if you've picked up any nuggets of wisdom yourself from whatever Harshil and Ankur have been saying so far in the last 40 minutes, do feel free to tweet that. Use the hashtag #UnlockGrowth, and you will win, Amazon vouchers and a lot of other goodies as well. Ankur, over to you, boss.
One simple thing here, the biggest realization in life, that good things take time. Just as simple as that. I think we're all living in a day and age where things happen at the speed of thought. So we are drugged into believing that success should happen overnight, that growth is the only way that successful businesses are built, and that if you don't have supernormal growth, if you don't have a fast-paced environment, then you don't have a successful business, which is far from the truth. Because when you look at truly successful businesses globally, and not just in India, you will see that they just took time and they kept going at it. So the art of showing up and just delivering whatever is it that you have to for the consumers that you've made your product for is going to take time, and one has to be patient.
It's fantastic. I had the good fortune of listening to the great man Jeff Bezos, where he said in an interview once that every single overnight success that he's been a part of took 10 years. That was again a mind-blowing moment for me. I think it's been a wonderful conversation, Ankur and Harshil. Let's now hear from the audience. We've had a bunch of questions pouring in from Twitter, and I'll try to do justice to all of the questions, and I will take some liberties and try to club a few questions which are aligned with the same theme, and paraphrase some of the questions and post to either of you. I think one of the first questions that has come through, I think Harshil, this is straight down your alley, is around how has COVID affected Razorpay? and what have been some of the things and strategies that Razorpay has adopted in order to combat the pandemic's effects?
Yeah, I alluded to it earlier, right? That when the pandemic hit, overall our payment volume went down by 30%, and our revenues are a direct multiple of our payment volume. So everything went down by 30-40%, and yeah, like coming out of pandemic, we could have just sat back and said that, hey, this is it, we can't do much, because we are a business that serves other businesses, and if businesses are going down, our volumes will go down with it. And primary reason it was happening was because segments like travel was shut down, lending was shut down, e-commerce itself was shut down during lockdown, and everything was going down. So one thing would have been that we could say, hey, that's how the market is, and we wait for the market to fix itself. The other thing that we did was that, hey, we stepped back together and said that this is happening. We can't fix the travel industry if it's going down right now. What can we do is we can look at the industries that are expected to gain during this time. So we looked at that, okay, a lot of people are staying at home and trying to sell things online. How can we make that easier? And that's why we launched payment buttons during that time. We looked at that, okay, there are lots of retailers, mom and pop shops who want to accept online payments right now. Can we make that easier for them? So we launched ePOS, and then we focused our energy on segments which are growing, like gaming, edtech, online grocery, online commerce. We focused on energy on them because our belief was that as lockdown gets lifted, these are the segments which will bounce back the first. And as we did that, and as we refocused our energy on that, we saw that by while the volumes were down around April, May, June, by July, volumes started picking up and started coming back to pre-COVID levels. August, we were higher than pre-COVID levels. And today, we are 70 to 80% higher compared to pre-COVID levels. We have not just bounced back, but we have risen strongly against pre-COVID. And that has happened just because of restructuring internally and finding an opportunity during the current times. So I think that is what every startup founder is trying to do today.
Very interesting. Thank you for that, Harshil. And Ankur, I have one for you, which I'm sure you must have anticipated. And that's a question that you probably get in every single webinar that you do attend. Given that you're an angel investor, what are the things that you look for when you actually invest in startups today?
Yeah, when you're angel investing, the bet is so risky, and the evolution is just so young that there are a few things that really can be used as a science. So one, there needs to be a massive amount of conviction around the founders itself, because at that point of time, you're just literally betting on those individuals. And that becomes a function of how smartly have they thought of the problem, how deeply do they think about the problem, what are their capabilities in solving that. That's number one. Number two is clearly the market. I think the one big realization that I've had is that the market is a very, very important and big determinant of success, because a bad team can still win in a good market, but a good team cannot win in a bad market. And that's why the market. And third is mostly their, whatever are the early signs or the early homework that they have done to establish why they could win or why they will lose. And it's like, one question that I love asking is, if your idea is so great, how come it hasn't happened already? And that stems from Paul Graham's essays as well, which is always like the worst response you can give is, I'm the SWAT one, so I'm going to do a better job of the startup. That's never how the world works. There has to be a very strong reason of why it hasn't happened already. So these are the three things that I essentially look for, almost in order of priority.
Very interesting. Thank you for that, Ankur. And the other question that is coming through, and I see multiple questions on the same topic around funding and making profits. If I were to club a lot of those questions together, Harshil, I'll probably pose that to you. If there is somebody who's starting up today, should that startup focus on making their own money, or should they focus on getting funded? Because you see a lot of startups, and the first thing that they talk about, first thing that a lot of entrepreneurs talk about is, I want to get funded. Or should they focus more on generating profits? What would be your mantra?
Yeah, I think every startup has their own journey and their own reasons, and every founder has their own reasons. I think building profits is, of course, the primary purpose of every business, and there's no denying that. Whether you raise funding or not, it's not that I'll raise funding and I'll never make profits. Even to your investors, how will you make profits, or when will you make profits? So making profits is the first and primary reason for building a business. But sometimes build business in a domain where profits come late and you need to raise funding for that. There come businesses where profits come early, and every company, there is no right answer, right? Like every company has its own. You will have small businesses in and around your locality which are doing really well, which make good amount of money, which never raised funding. You start on a shop, you get customers, and you start making money. And that's a perfectly fine. And in fact, the most logical way to build a business is to do that you start a company, get customers, make money. But there are domains where you can't do that on day one, right? For example, if you're building an electric car startup, you can't expect to make money on day one. You'll have to invest a lot of money. You'll have to put in a lot of funding behind it. And only after a certain point, when you reach a certain scale, that's when you start seeing those returns. So what you need to have is you need to have a plan for making money, whether that plan involves making money today, whether that plan involves making money a year from now or 2 years from now. But there has to be a plan, and the risk reward should make sense. You shouldn't be investing and raising money for a startup which will make, let's say, a mediocre amount of money after 2 years, right? Then the risk doesn't make sense. The risk, as long as the risk reward makes sense, there's no right answer to it. But to simplify it down, the purpose of the business in the end is to make money, and having a plan to make money is the most important thing, whether you today or whether you make it after 2 years from now.
Very interesting. Thanks for that, Harshil. The next question is pretty interesting and, alludes to a lot of the points that both of you mentioned over the course of this conversation. We spoke about entrepreneurship now being a lot more egalitarian, not being elitist, about how David now has a chance against Goliath. The question is around tier 2 and tier 3 towns in India, how it's not just about the Mumbais, the Bangalores, the Delhis, Hyderabad, Chennais of the country, where we're seeing the next wave of entrepreneurship, so to speak. Do you believe that will come from tier 2, tier 3, and some of the rural hinterlands of the country? What have been some of the lead indicators that both of you have observed from your respective viewpoints, which possibly attest to this? Ankur, if you want to go first, please.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I am such a firm believer in whatever you may call it, and I don't want to be calling it Bharat just because everyone does. But if you look at tier 2, tier 3 India, it is massive. Like when you're looking at the economic revival of sorts that the country is experiencing, you'll see that the rural demand has gone up far faster back than the urban demand. And that's largely, again, because of trust. Rural economies run on trust. So in times of shit, there is a little bit of shakeup, but when times are back, the trust very quickly comes back. It's not transactional for them. It's always based on trust. While in urban, it's mostly transactional. It's like, kaun kahan se sasta de sakta hai, jaldi de sakta hai, and so on. So that is one. Number two is the influx of smartphones, geo coming in, payment becoming far easier. All of these are just necessary ingredients for anyone in the country to become a solopreneur or starting up their own setup wherever it is. And the early signs were being witnessed when you saw the likes of TikTok, the likes of Instagram Reels, doing so well, driven by what was vernacular India and tier 2, tier 3 India content. Because they always had it. ऐसा तो नहीं है कि रात को they realized that there is something called an internet and then they started dancing and playing football. They knew that all along, but they never had that platform. And it was created, and that's when it just exploded. So I'm such a big believer that the next 2 decades for India will be a far more uniform story of wealth creation and distribution than the country has seen so far. It will not be the snooty tier metros and all those hobnobs that we hang around with. It will be a lot under the hood. And that's why one of my favorite questions is, are you middle class? And the number of people who raise their hands saying, I'm middle class. Like, you're not middle class, boss. You're just insanely rich. Like, middle class is the guy who's driving the Uber and the rickshaw. Like, that is middle class India. And they are witnessing a comeback like nobody else. And you just need to be prepared for that.
Hashtag hard hitting, Ankur. Thanks for that. Harshil, what have been, these kinds of demographic changes that you have seen to the makeup of the Indian entrepreneur from your Razorpay vantage point?
Yeah, I started Razorpay while living at my parents' house in Jaipur, and we were a 2-person startup there, and we were building that there. Of course, this was like 5 years back when it was really hard to scale a business in a tier 2 city. So we started in Jaipur, we grew up to a certain size, but at a certain point of time, we had to move to Bangalore as we had to scale up and hire more engineers. I think today world has changed a lot, and I think code is accelerating the trend. Today, like the entire Razorpay as an organization work from home. So it doesn't matter whether my engineer is based in Bangalore or Gwalior or, I don't know, some remote village in the northeastern part of the country. And people are working from home, people are working on Zoom calls, on remote calls. And I think it is an absolutely best time to build a startup out of a smaller city. The reason we started our company in Jaipur was that we could keep our costs really, really low. And we were forced to move to Bangalore at a certain point of time because that's where the infrastructure was. But now, in a post-COVID world where companies can operate remotely, companies can work entirely on the internet, I think entrepreneurs can do a lot better by working in remote towns, tier 2, tier 3 cities, and save a lot of cost and burn that you incur in a large city. I mean, the amount of the way our burn growth went up just because of moving to Bangalore. If we could stay and continue in Jaipur, we would have done that, because that was a lot of money that we had to unnecessarily spend just because of Bangalore's living expenses. So I think it's absolutely the best time to build a company, build a startup, build a business out of tier 2, tier 3 city, and COVID has just helped with that.
It's very interesting. And one of the other anecdotal inputs that I can provide here is that at Razorpay, we have a partnership going on with one of India's largest e-commerce marketplaces. And I was actually in a webinar where I was talking to a lot of their sellers. And I was actually stopped in between the webinar, and people actually asked me to stop speaking because they couldn't understand what I was saying. They couldn't understand the English that was being spoken. They said, "We're all from tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. Please speak in Hindi." And which was an aha moment for me. And one of the other data points that we've been seeing at Razorpay, just building on top of what Harshil just said, almost more than half of our sales team's conversations, the sales team that converses with SMEs and startups today, are not in English. And this is on a significantly increasing pie over the last year or so, which again is another data point that attests to what Harshil just spoke about. We're seeing a huge influx of entrepreneurs and businessmen who are looking to start up from India's rural hinterlands, which I think is very interesting. I have a very interesting question, which I am going to ask you, Ankur. I think you would enjoy answering this. The question is, can introverts succeed today in India's current startup ecosystem? Because it seems to appear that the guy who talks more, or he or she who talks more about their business and who's able to network better, who's more extroverted, who has better connections, who has better pedigree, those are the ones who get ahead. Can introverts, people who probably are not that pedigreed, so to speak, can they succeed?
Yeah, let me not make a claim of whether they can or not. Let me just answer the question slightly differently. If there was ever a time in global history when introverts could succeed, it's right now, because there's nothing that extroverts have going for them as against what you don't have. Like, there is no body language that they can exuberate over a Zoom meeting. There is nothing that they can do which will get them to hi-fi and hobnob with the top people in a networking event. Nothing whatsoever. So it's level playing field. And of course, I'd start with the admission that there is nothing about entrepreneurship that doesn't make introverts successful at it. Introversion has nothing to do with entrepreneurship. It's where you draw your energy from. Do you draw it from people, or do you draw it from within? I would in fact argue that you would make a terrific entrepreneur if you were an introvert, because then you don't need to rely on what the world is giving to you as validation for you to know your own self-worth. You draw it from within. And really, really hard journey, and as much as you can just believe in your own self, it will hold you well. So I don't think introversion has anything to do with entrepreneurship, but if there was ever a time, this is it.
Fantastic. If there ever was a time for you to start up, and if there ever was a time for David to beat Goliath, now is the moment. That essentially is what Ankur is saying. Please do tweet that out. Use the hashtag #UnlockGrowth, and stand a chance to win goodies from Amazon and more. Harshil, I have an interesting question for you, which I'm sure you will enjoy answering, which probably might potentially be one of the last few questions of the webinar today, which is around, how do you find your ideal co-founder? It's almost like making a life partner decision. You got lucky, you picked your college senior. For other people who might not be that lucky, what kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, Vida, you said it right. Like, finding a co-founder is like finding a spouse, right? There's no easy answer to it. Who will fit, how will fit. I think most important thing is that people look for a specific skill set in a co-founder. Like, you hire employees for skill set. You don't get a co-founder for skill set, right? So people say, I want a co-founder who knows programming. I want a co-founder who knows sales. I want a co-founder who knows marketing. I mean, if you need a co-founder who needs sales, hire a sales head, right? A co-founder is somebody who shares the vision that you want to build, who shares the change that you want to build out with your business, who sees the world or the business direction as the way you see it. And because when you go on that journey, the skills that you'll need, the skill any founder needs, like if you were to list down the skills a founder needs to build a business, there's no limit to it. The skills will always change. At different points of time, you'll need different skills. What you need is somebody who can understand you and who can be with you as you go through the tough times that you will inevitably face as you build a startup, right? So one of the best ways to look for a co-founder is to find people that you trust really well, who you have worked with or interacted with, and who you think share your worldview, share the ambition that you have in about your business. And as long as you have those things sorted out, skills and everything else can be figured out over time. The reason Shashank and us got together is not just because he was a college senior, but because during college we used to be part of the same technical group, and we used to build together. And while building those projects together, we would interact. And it was not just Shashank; I would interact with a lot of people. But with Shashank, I felt that we thought very similarly. We had very synergistic worldviews. We had arguments. We had a lot of arguments, and we still do. But we could always arrive at we could argue and find a way to come at a decision together. And I think those are the answers you need. And again, it kind of sounds like, again, finding a spouse, somebody who you can share the long journey with, who can be with you through times and good times. But more importantly, with somebody who you can in co-founder in particular, it might not be needed with a spouse. You need somebody who can also give you a counter perspective, but at the same time, you both can debate and arrive at a consensus.
Yeah, thanks for that, Harshil. We're almost out of time. It's been a fantastic discussion, Ankur and Harshil. We're going to wrap it up by, I'm going to ask both of you, a quick question. If there was one nugget of wisdom that you would give to entrepreneurs today, one key thing that they need to follow and one thing that they need to stay away from in this new world order, and we spoke about how the pandemic has fundamentally altered the business landscape, what would that be? Ankur, why don't you go first?
I'd say the most important thing is don't let anyone else define your success or failure. As an entrepreneur, it's very important that you define it for your own self. And one thing that I would encourage you to stay away from is anyone who tells you don't spend time with customers.
Yeah, before I come to you, Harshil, I'm just going to give all of the attendees, the Typeform link. I'm just sending everybody a link in the chat window. Please do fill out your information in the link, and Razorpay will make sure that you get access to the 50,000 free credits as promised. And you will be able to receive 50,000 rupees worth of monies from your customers at zero commission. So please do fill out your information in the Typeform. And while you do that, Harshil, if you could go next, please.
Yeah, one advice I would have is, I think, especially when you're building a business, growth trumps everything. As long as your business is growing in terms of revenue, in terms of scale, everything else gets sorted out, right? So the employee who doesn't want to join you today will join you tomorrow as you continue to grow. The investor who doesn't want to invest in you today will invest in you tomorrow. The PR coverage that you're not getting today will come in. Everything else will get sorted out. And a lot of times, entrepreneurs spend a lot of time in, hey, I didn't get to hire this person didn't invest in me. All of those things will get sorted out as long as your business is growing. So growth is the answer to everything else, and growth means growth in revenue. And this one thing I would like people to stay away from is that, like, don't build a business or a startup for limelight. Limelight is an outcome of the growth and of the success that you see. But a lot of time people want to build a startup just because building a startup is cool and a lot of people are talking about it. I think that's one of the worst reasons to build a startup. Build a startup because you feel for a problem, because you think that you can solve it better. And limelight, growth, everything else is an outcome of it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Harshil. That was pretty philosophical. Thank you so much, philosophical Harshil and hard-hitting Ankur. It's been an absolute pleasure. This last 1 hour seemed 5 minutes, and we could go on and on. It's been an absolute pleasure discussing, and I'm sure the audience here must have had as much fun as we enjoyed bringing it to them. This discussion has been very enlightening. Thank you so much once again for this time, and a big thank you to the audience for actually taking time to attend this webinar, and I wish all of them the very best of health. I hope your family, your loved ones, your employees, your co-workers, everybody is safe and sound, which is very important in the kind of times we live in. Just to reiterate once again, please put out tweets using the hashtag #UnlockGrowth, and stand a chance to win some goodies. Talk about some of the things that you've learned, some of the questions that have possibly been unanswered, and we will come back to you and answer those questions. Please fill out the Typeform. It's there on the chat window, and you will get the Razorpay 50,000 free credits as well. Thank you so much to everybody for making time. It's been an absolute pleasure to run the second edition of the Unlock Growth webinar from Razorpay. Stay tuned for more. Stay safe. Take care. Have a nice day. Bye.